not far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Aloha, everyone. This is Larry Camp, and welcome to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast, which just happens to come with a side of Hawaiiana. Nobody Knows Your Story is a podcast which I believe will impact each listener in a positive way. As you listen to the experiences that have transformed, shaped, and guided each guest, perhaps you'll better understand your own personal journey. Some will surprise, some will make you question, and some will inspire, but all will leave you in a better place for listening in. As for the Hawaiiana, well, that's just a big part of my life story. So I invite you to check in from time to time, or better still, add Nobody Knows Your Story to your list of favorite podcasts. You'll enjoy hearing the life experiences of people just like you. Hey, aloha, my friends, and welcome to a Tuesday morning, August 2024 life story. Of course, it may not be Tuesday morning or even 2024 when you hear this, but that's the beauty of podcasts. This story will be with us forever, frozen in time. Well, as long as I pay the monthly hosting fee. So, hey, we just heard Pahoho from Josh Totofi, and mid-podcast, we're going to hear Kimmy Minor perform Ketchitan. Now, these are two different types of Hawaiian/Polynesian music, but these are two of my favorite artists, so please support them by purchasing their music. Now, my guest today, Lance Hillsinger, we've got a few things in common. We both grew up in Southern California around the ocean, and we agree that we prefer the warmer ocean waters of Hawaii to those cooler waters of Southern California. We might hear more about this as we hear Lance's story. So, Lance, welcome to Nobody Knows Your Story.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, as I prepare to do these podcasts, I just get a little bit of information on the individual. And so as I'm reading it, lots of times I'll be like, oh, yeah, I can relate with that. Or, oh, yeah, I've had a similar experience to that. So I saw several of those as I read through your information for sure.
Good.
So I must ask you, though, Church of the Religious Science. I saw that you mentioned that, and that is a church I had not heard of. It kind of put me down a little rabbit hole. So I saw that started in 1926 by a guy named Ernest Holmes. And now they actually call it Centers for Spiritual Living. I thought that was interesting. I grew up in a high demand religion, so any kind of religion is always of interest to me.
Yeah, my mother was a fairly religious person. My dad grew up Catholic, but was kind of wasn't so pleased with that church. When my mom and grandmother were affiliated with the Church of Religious Science, my grandmother actually met Ernest Holmes And it basically is a lot of power of positive thinking. And I used to say we were first cousins to Christian Scientists, and then I went to a Christian Science church out of curiosity, and now I say we're second cousins. We don't have anything to do with Christian Science.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about the name change. The church that I particularly attended most of the time growing up was in Redondo Beach. Frank Richley was the pastor at that time. He was somewhat known locally and had a great following. Then when he retired, the church kind of I don't want to say fell on hard times, but it wasn't as popular, and I haven't attended that church. I'm now a member of the Presbyterian Church in San Luis Obispo County, and I think faith is important. I was a child welfare social worker for 34 years, and only a very handful of cases did a family have any connection to any kind of organized religion.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that as you tell your story too, because that's close to me. My daughter got her master's in social work and has done a lot in her short lifetime since graduation in that field. And seems like every time we get together, she's got some interesting things to tell us, because let's face it, there's a lot of need for that in the world today.
And sadly, there's a lot of business on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. There's an underclass in America. How we will get people to be successful is a very big challenge.
You mentioned that, you grew up in that religion, and now Presbyterian, yes. But it sounds like, just from the little bit of information I've gathered, that you've been religious, though, it seems like, throughout your life. Would that be correct?
We say more spiritual.
Okay.
I'm working on my next book. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, a Christian's court investigators look at the Gospels. And I write in that book that God is sort of like air conditioning. It's there in the background. You don't really notice it all the time, but it's just there in the background. And that's sort of my philosophy. I'm not a person that goes to church every Sunday, but if I don't go to church on Christmas Eve, it doesn't feel right. So.
Got it. Yeah. And I've become more of, I would say, a spiritual person as opposed to aligning with any particular religion. I grew up in Fontana, California in my youth as a Mormon. So very few of us, didn't have any others really in my school other than maybe my sister or something. But, when you're a kid, you don't know much about it. You're playing Little League and going to Cub Scouts, and, life is life. So yeah, we are the religion of our parents. So, I mean, that's what I was.
Since you grew up in Orange County, you know about the Crystal Cathedral, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Okay. Robert Schuller, he was nationally known pastor and everything is Crystal Cathedral. Well, I have an interesting story about that I related in my first book. When I was a young social worker in late 20s, we got tickets. The Department of Child Welfare got tickets to the Christmas program there. But because of, the program started like at 8:00, would run late, and on a school night, there was no real practical way of taking little kids. They could only take teens. So I invited 2 teen boys on my caseload and a girl that was in a maternity home. And I would drive them, since we got free tickets, and this would be something, because they don't get to do those kinds of events when you're in a group home, your group home placement. And then just as I'm leaving the office to go pick up the boys, I get a call. Oh, sorry, we don't want to go. So I call up the girl who's in the maternity home. She's like visibly pregnant. And I said, I can't teach by myself. It just wouldn't be appropriate. I just can't. But she's pretty desperate to leave. She's desperate. So she says, I'll get 2 of my friends to go. I don't think I would do this today, but yes. So it says, okay, well, if you got 2 of your friends. So I drive to the maternity home, pick up her and her, so I go to the church, and I'm walking in. I suddenly realize I'm a young man walking into church with 3 pregnant teen girls.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one said anything, but no one was actually too welcoming either, too. And I go, wow, what? But it was one of those things that the girls in group home, they just want a little of regular life for a while.
Sure.
And I was pleased to be able to do that for them.
I interviewed somebody on my podcast. It's probably been a year or 2 ago now, but this individual had sought out his mother, found her over some time, but was able to find her. And his mother was a ice skater in, I think it was called the Ice Follies, back in like the 40s and 50s. And she got pregnant, had him, gave him up for adoption. But I thought the thing that was interesting was, because he had mentioned that when that happened, I guess she got sent away or whatever, kind of like this maternity home you're talking about. And I said, yeah, it's kind of strange how those things happened back in the day. And he goes, actually, that stuff still happens. He gave me a couple of examples of, I guess, some gals just not that long ago, like within the last few years, that got pregnant and they were still sent away. And these were people in a religious community and where appearance is important and that kind of stuff. So, and I grew up with that in high school. When I was in high school, I had 3 girls that I knew that got sent away to family members quite distant to have their children and then come back. So interesting.
The cases I had, social worker was removed the child from the mother's home. The girl was like 12 or 13 at the time. And she had had no contact with her father because they just moved and what have her. And we have to look with what we call the missing dad. It's almost always the missing parent is the missing dad, sometimes the missing mom. But because in the missing mom case, she usually abandons the kid to the grandmother. That's how you can have that situation. And it turned out that the father was a foster parent in another state. He
Oh,
had
wow.
married and became a foster parent, and we placed the girl fairly quickly with him, and she was thrilled to be with her mother had mental health problems, and their dad was established, had a regular job, and was a normal person. She was very glad to be placed with the father she never knew.
Was he aware that he had that daughter?
He was aware, but people move and whatever, they lose touch. They don't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
common relatives. It was a short-term relationship when he was a young man. Like I said, the girl is now 13. So
Yeah. Interesting. I want to talk a little bit more about your youth because what sent you kind of down this path, Lance, to get into this field of work? Because I think 30 plus years you've been doing this. So were there things in your youth that kind of pushed you that way, or was it just, I know that you went to UCLA and I like, again, I read some of the information, but I just wondered what was it that kind of gave you that focus?
Well, I very seriously considered law. My father and uncle were both lawyers. My father was a regular, like, family law lawyer. I mean, you're the kind of lawyer you'd have if you had a DUI or you ran a small business or he didn't do too much divorce stuff. My uncle was a corporate lawyer, made a lot more money, but I think my dad had a lot more fun with the job. And I saw that and I want to do something that's meaningful. And I think my dad cared about the people, even if he did criminal work too. And he liked the criminal work, but if you're what we call a conflict attorney, if you're a public defender, the public defender's office can't represent someone for some reason. There's a conflict to hire a private attorney to contract out. My dad loved doing that. So I saw that was it. So you have an attorney who cares about his clients. Of course, all attorneys do, but you care more about an individual who's running a business or who's going through a difficult divorce or something like that, more than you care about the corporate client.
Right.
I think that's safe to say. And then my mother being a more spiritual person. So there was a sense of that, of doing something meaningful with my life. I never planned to be a social worker. I started off at UCLA in engineering and then realized my math skills weren't that good. So I became a double major psychology and political science. I wanted to be a diplomat. That was my real desire. I took the civil service exam for that. They only offer it once a year. Most of it is English. It's not like read a paragraph and tell me what this paragraph says. It was rearranging sentences, and I just did awful. I couldn't do it. I said, I'm sorry, one section was English. I couldn't pass the English section. The questions about history and other things like that, I scored okay. But I took it again and again, didn't pass the English part of it. So I'm kind of like, look, I didn't pass the English class, but now I've authored books. So it's kind of my way of. So, anyways, being a diplomat didn't work out. Growing up in Southern California, I was trying to pick grad school. I was accepted to USC and I was accepted to Vanderbilt. I thought, I want to see some of the world. So I went to Vanderbilt on a scholarship. That was a research program supposed to lead you to a PhD in psychology, research psychology, academic track, not a clinical track. And then I realized, no, that wasn't for me either. Academia is very precise and it's very, did you publish? Did you not publish? And, there's a lot of research grants and all that stuff. And I go, no, that's not, I want to be more successful or have something more active. That's more, you get more reward out of it. So I returned to my native California, lived with my parents, which the IRS has a term for that. That's a boomerang child that's moved home and moved back. You're a boomerang child. So I was a boomerang child for a while. I got a job that didn't pay very much, working with kids, young adults who were mentally ill and developmentally delayed, so dual diagnosis. And we were supposed to help teach them community skills like riding a bus and work skills like mowing a lawn kind of thing. And I worked in a pair. I was the senior partner, then there was a junior partner. The junior partner, because they got paid like I didn't get paid much, and they got paid barely above minimum wage. So there was a lot of turnover. So one day I got paired with somebody, and I really didn't like her. I didn't like her at all. One of those things where if I said blue, she said green. But one day she said, let's take Dale and see if we get him a job working as a dishwasher in the county cafeteria. And I was about to say, that's a really stupid, and I caught myself, no, that's a pretty good idea. So we went down to the hall administration in downtown Los Angeles. This is in the pre-internet world. There's every job from animal control officer to zoologist in this huge binder. And fortunately, child services worker comes before dishwasher. And that's how I found my job. I said, I want this job. And I applied, and they were hiring a lot. There was such turnover in this job is that you would have a supervisor and 8 people in the unit. And instead of people in a roster of the job listing people alphabetically, they list them by seniority. After 1 year on the job, I was already in the middle of the pack seniority wise.
Yeah. Shows you
there
the
was
turnover.
That much turnover in the job.
Yep.
But I just found I had found my niche. I was so happy. It was the mix of law. It was a mix of what do we do? Because there's, removing a child from a home, that's a sledgehammer approach to things, but sometimes it's necessary when somebody has a severe drug problem or an extreme anger problem or extreme mental health problem. And how do you go? And I think you have to have a good moral compass, to be honest, to be that kind of job. And I'm happy with that. I wasn't the best at this, or didn't do very well at calculus. I didn't do a lot of other things, but I thought, maybe my moral compass is where I shine.
And there's a lot of, I guess, satisfaction that comes along with helping people too.
There was a lot of satisfaction. You see people get better. The system isn't perfect, and no social worker has a perfect batting average, but more often than not, it went better. People did get better.
Yeah. And I've mentioned this before in other podcasts about my parents were school teachers. And I remember asking my mom, because, school teachers don't make a lot of money, but she says, you know what? There's just something about seeing a child that doesn't understand a concept, and then you work with them, and then all of a sudden the light goes off and they get it. And she goes, that's the satisfaction I got as a teacher. And I get that. I understand it.
Yeah. And I start off in development with disabilities, and gains there were very small and very incremental, very slow progress. In child welfare, somebody can say, okay, this is my first day being clean and sober, and you can see the change in their life dramatically in a relatively short period of time. I was what we call a court worker for most of my career. A court worker takes the case from the detention hearing to the time when the child is declared dependent of the court, not ward. Ward is for when kids are delinquents. So when they're dependent, which is roughly a period of about 6 weeks. So some places were enough, that 6-week period was enough to see people starting to change.
Yeah, because they're in an environment that they hadn't been in before. And I think that's a big part of it too. I mean, you're taking them out of a bad situation many times. And so really almost any situation you put them into is going to be better than where they came from. So yeah.
Well, the kids were resilient, but I was talking more of the parents. You started to say, hey, yeah, okay, now I do need to change my life. And part of my job was to San Luis Obispo had a very progressive program where we would bring kids into the jail and let them have a in-person visit if they were generally under the age of 5, though that rule got to be older as time passed. So they could actually visit with their child in the jail. And a lot of guys, if you're having a supervised visit with your child in jail, the social worker there, that's a very emotional moment. And that was a lot of turning around. If you're about as low as you can go, and you can only way to go up.
Yeah.
And so that was gratifying seeing people go, most of the time go up. Some people still sabotage themselves.
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking more of the child, but yeah, for the parents, if they can finally kind of see or have that light bulb moment, like I was talking about with my mom, if they can kind of finally see, hey, I need to turn my life around, or I need to do this or that. And I thought that was an interesting approach to bring the children actually into the jail. That's something I've never even heard of.
Yeah. Normally you could visit through the glass, and that's what you
Sure.
do with older kids. But it was just felt with the younger kids, like under 5 or so, that just the parent having to get to hold their child was just good for everyone. It was worth a jail accommodating us with certain days of the week set aside to do that, and you basically had better outcomes. So,
I
and
noticed
jail
that,
staff was generally very cooperative with that.
yeah, I noticed that one of the things that you had mentioned that you grew up in what you consider to be kind of a loving home. You had good parents. I also know that you've been married to the same woman for a long time. And so you kind of have a life now of what I would call a pretty positive model when it comes to relationships. Do you think that's helped you in trying to help some of these, maybe these adults, and work on their relationships?
Yes, I think so. Yes. Yeah, my mom and dad, I realized I grew up in not wealth, but moderately. My dad was a lawyer. We didn't really have to want for anything. We took nice vacations to Hawaii, but including other places. And so I will answer your question, but what just jumps out at me is that social workers, we had to be at standby pay if they're on call. Some counties, like LA County, there was a specific unit that would handle cases after hours. But San Luis Obispo, smaller county, cases were had by you. You worked your regular day, and then you were on call all night, and then work the next day. And at 275 an hour standby pay. And having grown up with relative wealth, I said, I'm worth more than that. I was just outraged that that's where we were. I know other people who apparently didn't come from, they were grateful to have a job. But I said, no, I'm worth more than 275 an hour. And to just strike this home, my daughter for a brief while was, doing um, Uber Eats kind of job, and she was a standby driver. She was paid $6 an hour to be standby deliver pizzas, because the company would never know how many people are going to order a pizza given, so they have to have the driver on standby. She got double my salary. I think because I came from basically a healthy environment, it allowed me to not judge people as much. So if they did something stupid, if they made certain decisions in their life, I haven't been there, so I can't really judge them hardly. I can help them get out of there the hole. And I remember a training class. We have to take ongoing training classes, and one person said, "These people we work with are just like us." I said, "No, no, they're not just like us. They are different. There are people who are addicted to meth. They are people who have serious anger management problems. And by them being so different, I can't. It's hard for me to judge them. I think it may be, yeah, a role model. I didn't get to tell them I've been married, X number of years or whatever.
Sure.
But I think they saw a different world.
Yeah, it's kind of, if you flip that and you are a child that comes from a broken home and you never know where you're going to sleep at night. Maybe you're sleeping in a car sometimes or on you're couch surfing with your mom or whatever. And then you see the opposite of that. You see a couple who's been together for 20, 30, 40 years and doing so yeah, it's a different world. I have a son who's been in and out of prison for the last 20 plus years. And he said to me one time when he was talking with some other inmates, they're like, I didn't have a dad. I started doing drugs when I was 8 years old. And, I started stealing when I was 11 and this and that. And so, no surprise I'm here. But what are you doing here? because my son came from, same parents. He graduated high school. He did really well on his SATs. He was all conference baseball player. He had all the things that people from the outside looking at him would think exactly that. What are you doing here? And my son says, I made some bad choices. But my son said, yeah, but they were right, because I'd look at them and I'd think, I can see why they're here. I'm here because I'm a knucklehead. But yeah, he couldn't help but just see how crazy that really was.
Don't you know you have a heart that glows? A broken soul can turn from bronze to gold. Can you see the cracks beneath the everywhere and everything? But that's just how so we can get you 10. We can get you 10. Can't you see it's sparking energy? Keep shining, you're rubbing off on me. Can you see the cracks beneath everywhere and everything? But that's just how the stories get through. You don't have to hide the real you that's inside. You can let your light glow, so we can get you 10. We can get you 10. Basking in your sunshine, so bright, bright, bright. Every inch of your life, so bright, bright, bright. Reflecting on my skin like the warmth of summertime. Illuminate the whole sky. Shine, shine, shine. You don't have to hide the real you that's inside. You can let your light glow. Open up the shades, clear the dust away. You can let your light glow, so we can get you 10. We can get you 10, we can get you 10. So we can get you 10, get you 10, get you 10. We can get you 10.
You know, you retired not too long ago at 60. Is that when you started writing your first book, or had you already written a book at that point?
I wrote most of my first book, In Place of the Parent, why I was a social worker. And I just want to make it clear, I didn't write it on government time. I didn't use any government resources. This was all on my own computer. I didn't use anything, no government things. So
It's good with me, Lance.
I started-
You're all good.
I started working on it because, especially when LA County, the system was really bad at that time. There were some real serious flaws with the child welfare system, and I was angry, and I wanted the system to change, and that's why I wrote a book. Some of those changes occurred during my career, so I didn't have to, so the book went through a few rewrites, but that was the purpose, because I wanted to make the child welfare system better.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I wanted to do. The other thing is I wanted to encourage people to be foster parents, because that's one of the things that will make the system work better. If you're traveling 2 hours to go visit a foster kid, that's 2 hours you're not working. So if you only have to go 15 minutes, that's an efficiency. People say, well, why don't we make child welfare better? That's the one thing that make it more efficient, better, just more time. So more foster parents, and then the various changes I wanted to make in the system.
And that's admirable, because you, having been in that system for all those years, you saw where things could be better. And like you say, some of the changes were made during their time that you were there, but still, I'm sure there's still, like you say, well, that's probably what's in the book, right? I mean, you're talking about things that still could be better if the guys would just try it or do it or whatever.
And just to sum up those things that could be better, is more and more time I was spending in front of the computer instead of not in front of clients.
Yeah.
It was always heavily in the bureaucracy, and it sort of has to be, but it got more and more so. And that's one of the things I wanted to fight, was that if you want people to help people, you got to put them in this opportunity to have them actually help people, and not be inputting data into a computer.
Yeah. What did people miss the most about COVID? I mean, people were doing meetings on Zoom and all this stuff, right? But what did they really miss the most? it's kind of that human contact. It's like you're saying, it's sitting across from each other and seeing the body language and being able to, I mean, you can only do so much when you're just looking at a screen. So I get what you're talking about. And especially for those people, because those people are struggling and they need help. They want your expertise. Sometimes maybe they don't want your expertise, but it's what they need. And so, yeah, no, I get it. Totally.
One of the things that I would do, about roughly 2/3 of our cases that come into court were substance abuse related, neglect due to substance abuse. So the last working day before New Year's Eve, I would go and try to make a surprise visit to anybody in my council. Sometimes it's just not practical because of distance and time, like I was saying, and just knock on their door. Hey, what are your plans for New Year's Eve? Just make sure that you're just. And I can say that no one screwed up on New Year's Eve in my caseload. Maybe I did something good there. Maybe it was unnecessary in 80% of the cases. Maybe they would have been, or 90%. But I have to say that somebody along there, having your social worker come by, remind you on the day part of New Year's Eve that what are your plans to stay sober?
Yeah.
Maybe it helped something.
Oh, 100%. I mean, anybody that's going through Alcoholics Anonymous or where you're going to these meetings, one of the first things they do is they try to assign you a sponsor. And that's because they know that they're going to be difficult times. And so you showing up on that doorstep on New Year's Eve, you knew that you're dealing with people that already have had a history of some substance abuse and problems and things. And so just you being there and being that reminder, like you say, maybe it was only 10% or 20, you don't know, but guaranteed somebody, because you did that, stayed away from doing something they shouldn't have done. So yeah, good. Admirable. So that's the one thing that comes from that job. And that's the thing that I've gotten is I've talked to my daughter is she just says, yeah, some of these things are sketchy and there's kind of scary situations I've walked into at times. But when you're able to see and feel like you maybe helped make that change in an individual for the better, then it's just super rewarding. So I'm glad that we have people like you that are out there that have done these things and that can now pass this knowledge on to other people too. And that's the benefit of coming from your books and putting things down in writing. So that'll help others. And that was your first book, right? I think
right.
I know you're on your fourth book now, right? So what were the other two in between?
Well, the second book is Build a Better Bridge, Social Policy for the 21st Century. We have a lot of poverty in America still. Poverty rate is around 11-12% of the population. Goes up and down with the economy, but that's been roughly before the war on poverty from it's the 60s. It was in the high teens, nearly 20%. But we actually have in numerical numbers more poor people than we did in the 1960s. Even though the rate is down, the actual numbers are greater. Mm-hmm. And in juvenile court, almost all of the parents that came into juvenile court were poor enough to qualify for court-appointed attorneys. Now, this is just an aside. This is one of my bugaboos. In some states, you're not entitled to a court-appointed attorney in a juvenile case. You have to represent yourself because it's considered a civil proceeding. And I just think that that's outrageous. And I think eventually a case is going to get to the Supreme Court about that. It says no, just like a Miranda decision said, in a criminal case, you have to be read your Miranda rights and everything. I think we're going to say, hey, in a case where your child's removed, and if you're poor, you get a right to an attorney. But sure. I hope that happens someday. And because I did see a lot of poverty and maybe being more sensitive because I grew up in an upper middle class home, because I saw that, it's an advantage. It is. So what are we going to do about it? Well, there's all sorts of things. There's, of course, no one grand solution. Conservatives will tell you, well, people just have to work harder. Well, that's part of it. There are people who are, as I say, allergic to work. But one of the things that like I point out in the book is like, well, I pointed out on podcast, it didn't happen yet when I got the book, but in San Luis Obispo, we have municipal parking lots. We're very dependent on tourism. And we used to have parking lot attendants, who would take your money. And you could have been the hardest working, friendliest parking lot attendant. But a couple of years ago, the city went to an automated system. A lot of people out of work. No matter how hard you worked as a parking lot attendant, now you don't have a job. And so our society is facing those decisions. Automation has really cut the number of hours. Cars are much more complicated than they were, say, in the 90s. But we also have industrial robots. So it's almost a wash there. manufacturing jobs, they're roughly 2/3 of what they were in the 90s. It goes up and down a little bit, but whatever party's in power, it doesn't change that much. It may be up a few points or down a few points, or the economy goes up and down, but you're still talking about a third of people who would have been employed in a decent paying job as working building automobiles that are not. And on the other, automation of checkout counters, in supermarkets and McDonald's and all this stuff. And it's just like, where are those people going to earn a living? And that's the thing. And some of it hits men more often because men, roughly 2/3 of the manufacturing workforce is male. So that cuts in things. Jobs that are not automated, like nursing and teaching, are predominantly female jobs. And the percentage of men in those jobs, so in nursing, it's increasing, but in teaching, it's decreasing. There's been a steady decrease in the percentage of men going into teaching.
Certainly AI and all the different things that are happening now are going to be reducing jobs. I just saw that Major League Baseball is testing robotic umpires. That I only bring that up because that just is mind blowing to me, because that's been a passion of mine for 50 years, is playing ball. And to think that you're going to have a robot back there making the calls just seems so wild.
That's part of the game, is the interaction between the umpire and the players. That's part of the game.
Yeah.
But yes, that's all. You're right. And professional umpires, they make good money. What are they going to do?
Yeah. What are you going to do when Earl Weaver or Billy Martin or somebody like them kicks dirt on the plate? The umpire, I guess, or the robot will just stand there. I don't know. It's very different for sure. Well, hey, let's wrap up a little bit here by talking about some of your experiences in Hawaii, because I know you've been there more than once. And I think the first time, weren't you like 12 years old?
12, 13 years old, flying with my parents. Yeah. We went to Maui. That was a lot of fun. Oh, and Oahu. We went to both Maui and Oahu.
Where was that bird place you went to? Was that on Oahu?
That was on Oahu.
Okay.
And the bird farm there, and Hawaii Five-0, the original Hawaii Five-0 was very popular at that time. There's a sound and water show, sound and light show with an organist playing that live. And it was just really, really, really great.
Yeah.
And then several years later, I got married. I mean, talking 15 years later, went back to the bird farm with my wife. They're still playing Hawaii Five-0 on the organ. And it was just wonderful to hear. I just thought that was great. I felt sorry for the person. That's their job. They played Hawaii Five-0 for 4 or 5 concerts a day for 20, 30 years, but whatever.
Yeah. I
enjoyed it.
I had John Durrell on my podcast, and he was actually the keyboard player for the Ventures that did the theme to Hawaii Five-0. So
yeah. Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's one of my workout songs. I have, I work out and I get my iPod, and those are the songs. Was one of the songs on my workout list.
Didn't you say that you took your daughters to Hawaii and you took them to that, but the bird farm or whatever, it was gone now or something?
Yeah, the bird farm we drove all around and tried to look at the bird farm. We couldn't figure out exactly where it was, but we could clear it was no longer there.
Yeah.
We were kind of sad about that.
So if you had to, I ask people this all the time, what are some of your favorite things about Hawaii? Because I mean, I was just talking to one of my softball teammates the other day, and he goes, yeah, I went to Hawaii. It was like, yeah, it's all right. He goes, not my deal. He goes, I don't understand why people are so enamored with Hawaii. But for those people who have been more than once, I usually will ask them, what is it that you like? What is the thing that you found, I guess, interesting enough that you want to come back again?
Oh, well, when I was with my parents, Kilauea was the volcano. And, you're a 13-year-old boy, you kind of think you're indestructible. And yet there was this lava. You could walk on it, and it was warm. I was really surprised that we were allowed to get that close, and the smell. And, even I, as a 13-year-old boy, was saying, this is pretty risky here. I don't want to trip and fall and land on something that's, I think they're a little more protective of tourists now. But that was one of the things and looking down at the volcano. And I remember arguing with my mom that things would fall into the lava, and my mom would say, "Well, look, watch them burn up." She says, "No, Mom, they're vaporized." That's being kind of bratty because they don't burn up; they're being vaporized. And one of my dad's friends was a chemist, and yeah, they're vaporized. They're not burning in the sense of regular burning. But we like Three Tables, and I just want to tell a story about Electric Beach, if I could.
Sure.
I'm a pretty good swimmer. I've snorkeled a lot of my life, like I said, and my girls are not particularly good swimmers. So my wife and my daughters, they're playing at Electric Beach. They're in the thing, and I'm way out. I'm fairly far out. I've got my thing. I'm looking at some beautiful fish. I've got my GoPro. I'm a happy camper. And then my daughter Clara swims out without fins and says, "Dad, you're out too far." I'm the better swimmer, and I have fins. You're the one that's out too far.
Right.
So I had to make sure that I was, get her back safely. And then I went back and swim. But that was like my daughter telling me I'm about too far.
One of those experiences you remember. But do you remember why they called that Electric Beach?
Oh, yeah, because that's a power station there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, most of my time when I was on Oahu was spent on the North Shore. So
Okay.
I rarely ventured into Honolulu, except I had a job every 2 weeks to pick people up at the airport and then bring them back to the North Shore and then take that group back 2 weeks later and do it again. But other than that, I was pretty much on the North Shore. And then we gravitated, 20, 30 years later, we ended up buying a place on Maui. So that's how we ended up on Maui. But yeah, as I talk to people who have been, they've all got the things that they like, and they've got some pretty good stories that they remember too, different things that have happened. And, like swimming with the manta rays at night, if you're ever over on the Big Island and, they have the lights, they'll put a light down at the bottom of the ocean, and then all the manta rays will swim around that light because they can see all the plankton and stuff that's around there. And so it's just wild.
Oh, I'm going to the Big Island in May. And that'll be my first trip to the Big Island since I was with my parents when I was like 12 or 13.
Yeah, you should check that out. It's kind of a fun thing. And if you're not certified, diver, you can snorkel. Like you said, you're a good snorkeler. And so you can just sit up there on top and look down, and it's still very cool. Yeah. It's fun, something fun to do, and something you don't really get to do many other places.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Lance, I'll go ahead and put your books in the show notes for the podcast, and make sure that people can, if they want to find out a little bit more about some of the things that you've done in your life, and certainly that first book about maybe ways that we can, help those that are struggling in that world of social workers and different things. Yeah, good place for them to do a little research and to be able to find some answers, maybe some thoughts that you have brought up that people are going to agree with. Yeah,
the child welfare is a very misunderstood program because of confidentiality and things like that. People don't understand it too well. So that's one of the things I wrote the book. And then, the larger welfare system is not well understood either. There's all sorts of, extreme views out there that people, veterans don't get housing. Well, the veterans have priority in housing. And if you're a disabled veteran, you have the highest priority in housing. So to dispel some of those myths too.
Like a lot of things in life, unless you are personally affected by it, or unless you've decided to study a particular field, a lot of times we just don't really understand what's going on. You watch the news, maybe you hear a headline on a story, and that's as much as you know. And even then, that's probably only accurate half the time, right?
Yeah.
All right, Lance. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you taking the time today to be on the podcast. I really do. It's always fun for me to visit with someone and to hear their story, because all of our lives are different and our experiences are different. But at the end of the day, there's also a lot of similarities too.
There are. Yes, it is. Well, thank you very much for having me.
You got it, buddy. All right. Hey, everyone, check back in 2 weeks. We'll have another interesting guest here on Nobody Knows Your Story. Aloha, Lance.
Thanks.
Down a little old country road not far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love.